Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pyramid Science Foundation live stream. I'm Lisa Richards, and we have Charlie Ziese here as always.
Hello, everyone.
Well, guys, we have another great show for you today. We're going to do part 2 of breaking down Charlie Ziese's new documentary, The Golden Ratio and Fluid Dynamics. And so this film explores the link between Russian pyramid geometry and fluid dynamics, revealing how the 76.345 degree angle minimizes drag, enhances speed, fuel efficiency, and stability. From animals to race cars and rockets, this sacred geometry could revolutionize technology, yet modern science has yet to fully embrace it. Charlie?
All right. Well, I'm gonna open up my screen here, and we're gonna get going. So bear with me as we open up. All right. So let me get that into slideshow mode. Can you see that okay, Lisa?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. Now we're going to do a bit of a review from last week. I ended sort of, I got into a new section and I probably shouldn't have gone into it because it would be confusing. So I'm going to review this real quickly. This is the last section we covered last week, which is golden ratio scaling in jet and rocket engine nozzles. So uh, let me, yeah. So, what we were trying to demonstrate in this little whimsical picture is that, we all know when we were kids, we loved to put our hand on the water hose nozzle and make it spray as far as we could. And that's a fundamental principle of fluids like water, that when you compress them, uh, they're going to flow faster. And the reason for that is essentially because they're incompressible. Now, why is that important? Because what we're going to be looking at today is not uh, in the context of water or fluids, but we're going to be talking about things moving through the air. And what's interesting is that when you do that, when you go above the speed of sound, all of a sudden the world flips and changes in a new direction. And so that's what this little diagram is going to be telling us today. This is a diagram that talks about subsonic versus supersonic flow dynamics. Now, what does that mean? Subsonic is below the speed of sound, and supersonic is above the speed of sound. Now, if we look over in the left-hand column under geometry, we see that the air is coming in, moving from left to right, and we have essentially two different nozzle geometries. The one on the top is getting larger, and that's called a divergent nozzle. And the one on the bottom, you can see that the nozzle is getting smaller, and that's called a convergent nozzle. Now, that picture that we saw the young boy with the water hose, that's a classic example of a convergent nozzle, which means that it's getting smaller as you go down the nozzle. However, when you get into supersonic speeds, what you find is that geometry doesn't act as a nozzle that increases thrust. It actually acts as a nozzle that decreases thrust, and it's exactly the exact opposite when you're looking at the subsonic. So rather than now that we're talking about supersonic speeds here, we're going to see that all of these engines for vehicles that are going faster than the speed of sound are going to have a divergent nozzle rather than a convergent nozzle. So we're going to see that in these examples. We showed this example of how powerful the suction is for gaseous explosion. We showed this example, this video. The researcher took a jar of water, put a tube into it, blew into this contraption. You can see that it's connected to the escaping air past the nozzle as it's starting to expand. And you can see the enormous amount of pressure that's placed on the water. It literally crawls up or is drawn up that tube very quickly. Similarly, if you just put some, like a air blower, as in this situation, you can see once again, you connect the open, empty uh, uh, plastic bottle, and it is literally all of the air is sucked out of that bottle by the forces of gaseous explosions. So, with that in mind, we talked about Gustav Laval, and we talked about expansive nozzles for supersonic travel. And then we looked at started looking at a couple of these nozzles. The rocket engine nozzle that we're seeing here was designed by Robert Pelterie. He was a French rocketeer. This is pre-World War II. You can see his geometry is virtually spot on, not quite, but is virtually identical to that of the golden ratio scaling. And this was done before World War II. And as we're going to see, the precision got better after World War and during World War II. Now, this is an example of a fixed geometry nozzle. We saw this last week. On the left-hand side, we see this nozzle at the base of the V2 rocket that was designed by Wernher von Braun. And then on the right-hand side, I found this blueprint. I always prefer blueprints if at all possible because they are the most precise for purposes of measurement. But we can see that golden ratio scaling fits literally like a glove inside of this rocket nozzle. And then we're going to show some other examples. These are what are called fixed nozzle designs. And again, all of these rockets ultimately have a speed that's higher than the speed of sound, or Mach 1, because they have divergent nozzles. Each and every one of them, though, with this golden ratio scaling geometry. So this is a fixed nozzle design, another Russian fixed nozzle design rocket, and a third one. And we're going to also show America has companies that make these very same kinds of rocket nozzles. Here's one from the United States that uses what's called a bell nozzle geometry. And these are more recent designs. Apparently, this helps for the nozzle to take up less room, which is a significant improvement. However, you're going to see that in the base part, or the bottom half of the nozzle, you're still going to see this golden ratio scaling showing up. So we see this in all of these rockets. This is the Raptor engine. This is Elon Musk, SpaceX. We see this geometry in those rockets as well. So I have in the appendix to the main documentary, I've got all of these various rocket designs, and you can see that they all conform to this very geometry. Now, what we're doing here, we're going to be looking at, I should have done this maybe earlier, but I wanted to show you the basic differences between a jet, ramjet, and scramjet engine. Really, the only important thing that I want to talk to you about are the angles and the geometries on the right-hand side here, at least for now, which is the exhaust side of these engines. And you can see that the turbojet, which is the first example, has a convergent nozzle, and the other two, which are ramjets and scramjets, you see that they have divergent nozzles. So that's the reason now when you start to look at rocket and jet engine nozzles, you'll be able to determine whether the airplane is actually going faster or slower than the speed of sound by whether it has a convergent or divergent nozzle. But anyway, here's some examples. This is a example of a early jet engine, the Allison J35, and this is an example of a fixed subsonic nozzle. The front end of the jet engine is on the right, and here on the left side we see the exhaust nozzle with the golden ratio scaling geometry. And here's another one, an Armstrong Siddeley Viper with a fixed nozzle. And here's an Allison J35 with a fixed nozzle as well. And all of these, is to repeat, are subsonic nozzles because we have a convergent nozzle. Now, here are some what are called variable nozzles. You're going to see these not on commercial airplanes so much. It's almost exclusively in military aircraft that need to be able to accelerate rapidly, either to take off from very short runways or for other reasons. But you're going to see here that this golden ratio scaling geometry is seen in the exhaust nozzle here. Now, one thing I want to point out is that this nozzle is not does not have the same geometry on the inside. This is actually a situation where the nozzle is just open. It's not divergent or convergent on the inside, but the nozzle design on the outside is conforming to the golden ratio scaling that's necessary to keep turbulence and stability intact. And here's another example, with a few examples of those. Now we're going to move on to ramjet and scramjet engines. And as we talked about earlier, a ramjet engine and a scramjet engine are going to have divergent nozzles. And we can see here on the left-hand side, we can see a divergent nozzle. And sure enough, when we go to measure that, we're going to see that it has this golden ratio scaling angle as well. Now, when we go into scramjet engines, it's almost impossible to find an engine that has been cut away so that you can see the insides of it. So it's very challenging to know which of these scramjet engines actually use golden ratio scaling and which don't. However, there are numerous diagrams on the internet that demonstrate this geometry in the diagram itself. So it's very challenging to know how and to what degree that golden ratio scaling is used in scramjet geometry designs, but it would be crucial in the exhaust function to have this geometry to maximize thrust. And so that's probably the reason why we're seeing this in the diagrams. Now we're going to move out of rockets and engines, which have shown golden ratio scaling in maximizing thrust. And now we're going to start to look at some of the fastest manned aircraft that have ever been built. And we're going to see that this golden ratio scaling shows up in every single one of these aircraft. Now, this was built in 1945. It's called the Bell X-2 Starbuster. It attained a speed of Mach 3.2 back in the immediate post-World War II era in 1945. Now, in the 1950s, here is another example. This is a North American XB-70 Valkyrie. It achieved Mach 3.2. And we can see here the golden ratio scaling geometry in the nose of that craft. This is a MiG-25 that flew at Mach 3.2, developed by the Soviet Union and put into service in 1964. We see the golden ratio scaling there as well as in the blueprint. Here's a Lockheed YF-12, originally flown in 1963. Again, after World War II, both the Soviet Union and the United States were in a race to get into outer space and go to the moon. So all of these ex-German scientists were put to work to develop these types of craft and missiles to get into a space race with each other. So once again, Mach 3.35 for the Lockheed YF-12, and we see again this geometry in the front. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, Mach 3.35 plus, again golden ratio scaling in the nose cone. Here's a hypersonic missile called the Mako hypersonic missile, Mach 5 from the United States with this geometry as well. Here's a more recent joint venture between the United States and Australia. This is called the Sci-Fire hypersonic vehicle, and it's achieved Mach 5 speeds as well. And here we see a blueprint of this hypersonic vehicle, and you can see it just fits like a glove. So this geometry was known and it's been passed along. Here's a Hermes quarter horse, again, a contemporary this is supposed to, this is a prototype for a commercial aircraft. And again, as we mentioned earlier, once people have been able to figure out how to get rid of sonic booms, I think we'll be able to see the resumption of supersonic and hypersonic travel in the commercial space. Here is a blueprint of the Hermes quarter horse as well. We see that the 13.654 geometry is showing up in the wings as well as in the vertical line of attack seen in the front and also in the stabilizer in the rear of the craft. Here's another 1960s concept vehicle. This was a McDonnell Douglas reconnaissance concept vehicle, where again we see this exact same geometry showing up. This is a North American X-15. This is essentially a manned rocket, but it's achieved Mach 6.7 in the 1960s, and again, golden ratio scaling in the nose cone. Now we're going to look at some experimental aircraft. Some of these are contemporary, and some are going to be back from the 50s through 70s timeframe. So this is a contemporary craft. Its name is Io. That's one of I believe, the moons of Saturn. But anyway, that's the company name. And this is called the Blue Edge. And again, you see the 13.654 geometry in the front, or excuse me, from the side view. And then you see the 27.309 showing up on the top view, both in the front and the rear of the craft. This is a craft that was developed in Great Britain in the 1960s, called the Bristol Siddeley Air Breathing Booster. This was part of a three-stage rocket system that was developed in the 1960s. Once again, couldn't ask for a better match to golden ratio scaling than we find in that blueprint. Here's another 60s craft by Bristol Siddeley. This was a blueprint of a supersonic transport that they were developing the 1960s. And once again, we see the golden ratio scaling in the blueprint as well. And here's another one, a Hawker Siddeley supersonic transport, another view of a concept vehicle back from the 1960s with this geometry. Here's a 1960s Lockheed manned hypersonic vehicle from 1966. And here we're seeing the 13.654 degree geometry. And here's another, this is called an experimental lifting body, the M2F2, that was developed, I believe, in the 1960s again. And again, perfect match, 27.309 degree geometry in the front of the craft. Here's another lifting body called the Martin SV5D from the USA in the 1960s. And these craft were designed, these lifting craft, not so much for speed, but as for their ability to provide lift. And so even though we're going to see these, and we've seen it, and we'll see it more in the hypersonic vehicles, this geometry is important for lift as well. Here's a Martin X-24B craft, again, an experimental craft built right after World War II with the 13.654 geometry on the side view and the 27.309 from the top. And we've seen that one before. So now we'll go on to talk about hypersonic vehicles. Hypersonic vehicles are, of course, the fastest man-made vehicles on the planet. I saw this picture. I believe this is from Boeing's website, I believe, but you can see this geometry is showing up in so many different ways in these hypersonic vehicles. Hypersonic vehicles and weaponry are among the most cutting edge technologies under development by a number of countries, including Russia, China, India, Iran, and the United States. Russia has the technological lead and in this area and has developed three different delivery systems for hypersonic weapons, airplane, ship, and ICBM systems. Hypersonic travel can be defined as a travel in excess of 5 times the speed of sound, or Mach 5. Now, that's an arbitrary number, so there's no magic, there's no physical properties that we know of that change. It's just a number that people have come up with to define the beginning of hypersonic speeds. Russia claims to have hypersonic weapon systems that travel, I say here, Mach 20. Actually, we're going to see Mach 27 showing up in the avant-garde. Golden ratio scaling is found in every successful vehicle designed for hypersonic travel, as this geometry minimizes friction and drag, reduces heat buildup, and maximizes speed and fuel efficiency. Now we're going to go over the 10 fastest hypersonic vehicles. We're going to see again the same golden ratio scaling in every single one of these vehicles. This is called the X-Core Lynx. It's a two-man craft that can take off from a traditional runway, but was able to do, to travel into space. So this was abandoned, however, recently, but it did contain the golden ratio scaling in the front of the aircraft. And this is called the Boeing X-51 Wave Rider, again from the USA. This was developed in 2005 and achieved a speed of Mach 5.1. Now, this is an unmanned craft, but the Wave Rider, once again, demonstrates this geometry in the body of the Wave Rider as well. So, we just see this all the time. We see this resurrection as well of this geometry in contemporary times. And that's important because we're going to see that this craft or this geometry was deviated from in our own hypersonic weaponry. And we'll see that later. Now, this is called the Rel Skylon from England, and this has a geometry of golden ratio in both the front and you can see here in the rear of the craft. If you can remember and visualize that Sears Hawk body that looked kind of like a tapered cigar on both ends, well, this was designed exactly, to meet those characteristics. And that Sabre ramjet engine that we saw earlier is actually what's powering this craft. So these nozzles that we see coming out from the engine areas here are going to have this golden ratio scaling as well. And here's the North American X-15. I think we saw this earlier, Mach 6.7, and we see the golden ratio scaling in the nose cone of that craft. This is a THAAD missile, a U.S. Missile system. We can see in the top right-hand corner, we see that we have golden ratio scaling once again in the rocket engine nozzle, as well as in the nose cone of the missile itself. So every one of these so far we've seen, and we're going to continue to see, golden ratio scaling is the answer. So here's the Zircon. This is one of the three Russian delivery systems. This is a ship launch system which achieves Mach 9. We see the golden ratio scaling in that vehicle. This is a Kinzhal version of the missile, which is delivered from underneath an airplane, and it achieves Mach 10. And now we're going to look at the DFZF vehicle. This is a hypersonic glide vehicle being developed in China, and it's achieved Mach 10 so far. Again, golden ratio scaling found in this vehicle as well. Uh, Here's an even faster vehicle called the Chef X2. This was developed in Germany, and Chef X is an acronym that stands for Sharp Edge Flight Experiment. The Germans are experimenting with uh, hexagonal shaped objects and other objects. As you can see here, I've measured the 27309 in the photograph up top, but you can see that this is not a conical structure. It's developed with six sides, and their purpose was to see how much impact uh, doing this with a structure that is much easier to build uh, would actually impact performance. So they've achieved again a Mach 11 with this and with this geometry. And then finally, we're going to get to the fastest one of all, which is the Avant-Garde hypersonic glide vehicle from Russia. You've got two views here, and you can see that on the right side, this is the best view of this for purposes of measurement, but it has the 27309 degree geometry. Now, since I couldn't find a blueprint of this, I wanted to check all of the various versions that I could find to see if this geometry was going to show up in all of them. And even though there are minor changes in the pictures available on the internet, each and every one of these has this golden ratio scaling geometry in its configuration. And here's an example of a side view of the Avant-Garde. And it shows the 13.654 that we've seen in all of these other examples. So to reiterate, we've seen it both in the Avant-Garde, Mach 27. We saw it earlier, actually, in our own U.S. space shuttle at Mach 25. So we know that golden ratio scaling is the key. It's been shown in every single one of these, and every single successful hypersonic vehicle uses this geometry. But now we're going to look to kind of conclude this section. We're going to look at a case study, and we're going to look at the DARPA HTV-2, which is shown here in the top right or top left-hand corner. This was the hypersonic glide vehicle that the U.S. had developed, and we're going to compare the geometries and the success or lack thereof of the HTV-2 versus the Avant-Garde. So the information here in this paragraph was excerpted from a Washington Post article from back in 2011. But essentially in 2011, DARPA conducted a test of its unmanned hypersonic glider dubbed the Hypersonic Technology Vehicle 2, or HTV-2. The vehicle was able to maintain stable flight for a while at 13,000 miles per hour over the Pacific Ocean. The stable flight lasted 3 minutes before HTV-2's flight safety system plunged it into the ocean. The agency now thinks that unexpectedly large pieces of the hypersonic aircraft skin peeled off. DARPA says that it expected some of the skin to wear down due to the extreme heat and speed of the aircraft. An independent review board has concluded that the most likely cause for the failure was unexpected aeroshell degradation. From what I'm going to show you in the next few minutes, I have to ask the question, could the lack of golden ratio scaling in the geometry of this DARPA 2 HTV-2 craft have caused this catastrophe? Well, we're going to look at the geometry of the DARPA HTV-2, and we're going to see that there is a substantial difference in the angle that's used in this craft versus all of the others, including the Avant-Garde. So I found this blueprint, and we're going to see the full blueprint. I'll show it to you here on the next page. You you can see here that this is the diagram of this very DARPA HTV-2 craft. And what we're seeing here is that they designed this with a geometry of 73.3 degrees, when in fact, uh, that corresponding angle should be the 76,345 that we see at the bottom of the craft. And if we were to see that, we would get the 27,309. But since they're using a 73.3 degree angle, the angle that we would normally associate with 27,309 in this case is actually 33.4 degrees. So it is approximately 6 degrees off from the ideal that we have seen in each and every one of these other craft. Now, I'm just going to show you that, just like with the avant-garde, there are a number of different uh, depictions of this craft, but I did see one that I could measure easily again with my protractor. It doesn't have the same angle at the back end, but there are many versions. But the 33.4 degree angle matches up perfectly in this example. So this is what this looks like from the perspective of the blueprint, and we're off by about 6 degrees on the front angle of the vehicle. Now we're going to look at what I'm calling the vertical angle of attack. We saw this earlier. The avant-garde has the 13.654 degree geometry in its vertical angle of attack, but it is far, far from that. And it's not any numerical, like a half of it or anything like that. This is just a seemingly a random angle, and we have to ask this question: is this causing the turbulence and instability that makes our hypersonic weapons not work? But it just becomes, difficult uh, to to know whether this is accurate. It's an accurate diagram. Everything seems to match up. So I've got to believe that this is accurate. And assuming that this diagram is accurate, you have to ask yourself, how was it that we lost our knowledge of this geometry when we even had it back in the early 2000s? But anyway, what this is demonstrating is, again, assuming accuracy of the diagram, is that every other hypersonic weapon, every other jet, everything else that we've seen in these examples had golden ratio scaling in its geometry, and this is off. So if this is true, I think we need to ask ourselves, how was it that we could spend this much money using a geometry that no one else has used and that didn't work? So I'm hoping that we're going to find that as we play catch up here in this world of hypersonics, that we're going to get this geometry right. We're not going to go into this today, but I do have pictures of more recent hypersonic glide vehicles that are under development, but they still seem to be off geometrically. So to conclude what we've found here today, although contemporary fluid dynamics has no way to quantify or describe the phenomenon, golden ratio scaling is found in every type of fluid dynamics environment where speed, maintenance of laminar flow, and stability are paramount. GRS is the geometry found as well in engine nozzles to maximize the thrust available from jet, rocket, ramjet, and scramjet engines. This research demonstrates that nature has a preferred pathway of implosion and explosion that manifests in the geometry of animals, birds, and air, land, and sea-based vehicles. So again, this is profound for a number of reasons, but historical analysis of ancient architecture and flying machines also indicate that GRS has been known about and utilized by rocketry experts and aerodynamics for thousands of years, and yet we're not aware of this. So finally, despite using GRS in the development of its high-speed vehicles during the 50s through the 80s, the best public, and in fact in the early 2000s, the best publicly available information out on the internet indicates that the U.S. hypersonic program did not use golden ratio scaling in the design of its HTV 2 hypersonic vehicle, which may have been the cause of its inability to maintain structural integrity during flight. So, with all this research, and again, I would encourage any of you who are interested in all of these topics, going into them in greater depth, go to the master documentary that's available on both YouTube and Rumble on the Pyramid Science Foundation, and we've got a 6.5 hour documentary that goes into all of these things in much greater detail. But now, with respect to next steps for me, I would love to see these concepts integrated into fluid dynamics and computational fluid dynamics. I've got to believe that once people see this, that it could literally revolutionize the way that people approach aerodynamics and hypersonic aerodynamics in the future. Second, I want to measure the ionization fields produced by golden ratio scaling implosion with a view to developing sustainable free energy through ion harvesting. So we I now that we know that this is implicit in the structure of the universe, we have all of this data from the Russian pyramid research. We have testing that was done on the Great Zimbabwe Ruin. These both of these structures have this geometry, and that's about the only thing they have in common. But they both create huge ionization fields. So we want to see if we can't figure out, now that we've proven this even more profoundly with fluid dynamics. I want to see if we can get some free energy demonstrations going on with the pyramids using this GRS implosion technology. And then finally, I'd love to explore the potential of golden ratio scaling and nuclear fusion. A number of technologies out there right now are using implosion as their preferred way of attempting to achieve fusion. And in fact, a number of firms have achieved fusion already using implosion. The problem with all of these techniques, however, is that they are not over unity. And again, over unity means that the system, in order to be over unity, must produce more energy from the fusion reaction than it takes to create that reaction. So I believe that if we could get this geometry tested in the nuclear fusion world, we may find that this could be a significant improvement in the results, and it may get us to an over unity situation. Of course, both of these, the ionization fields and the nuclear fusion ideas, are both based free energy that could really have a profound change on the world, and they're both based on golden ratio scaling implosion. So that said, we're going to stop this section. If you have questions, you can contact me. But also, if you're interested in achieving or getting a pyramid, you can go to stargatepyramids.com, use GRS, that's for golden ratio scaling, GRS 20, for 20% off of your pyramid orders. So I thank you for listening, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, everybody. And like Charlie said, leave any comments below the video here, and make sure you like and subscribe. Follow us on Rumble if you can, because we're trying to get more over there. We're able to talk more freely over there than we are on YouTube. So lots of love to everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.